No, seriously, I can't get viruses on this. I should have, it should be there. Well, I hope it's there, but whatever. Did you get an email?
No, yeah.
Kiss my wife. Thanks. If not, I can just do it tonight. It's not a big deal. It's really weird. It should show up. Oh yeah, it's there. So it says mock notes.
Oh.
Right? So yeah, I'm not writing anything special. Okay, so you guys all know what value is, right? Picking cheap stocks, whatever. This is important because, like, if you don't know like the baseline of this, you know, you're just going to be picking stocks randomly, right? Okay, so the next type of investor is a growth investor. Okay, what do you guys think growth investor is? So investor is an investor, right? Invest money. So what do you think growth is?
Investors who a strategy of picking stocks that trade more than it's worth.
Yeah, that's true. That's fantastic. But like, so to help you remember a lot of words in finance, just remember like the titles of stuff. So for example, investor is an investor, right? Value is value, right? Buy something cheap. Growth, right? Think of it. You're investing in stuff that grows fast, right? So usually, I'll give you a quick example. So usually technology companies, right? Like Google, Apple, just like a lot of Cisco, whatever. A lot of technology companies grow fast. And the reason they grow fast is, think about it, right? You guys are most familiar with Apple because you guys have a lot of their products, right? They put out a new product like every 2 months or something. You know, they're always creating something new, right? And what usually happens is once that company releases a new product and a lot of people are buying and stuff, the reputation goes up more, right? So that means the stock goes up. So if you're doing that every 2 months, right, your stock is going to keep growing if people like your stuff really fast. And a lot of technology companies do stuff like really, really fast. They have a new product, boom, 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 boom. Does that make sense? So just to think of it like another way, growth investor is the opposite of value investor, right? Because if you're buying something that's already growing very fast, that means it's expensive, right? So I guess oh, here we go. So growth investor is strategy of picking stocks that trade for more than their value, or that actually. Let's see what definition they have. Okay, never mind. Let's just say. So the definition technically is. Picking stocks that have growth potential, right? That makes sense because you're picking stocks that grow. But what in order to help you guys remember it, right? Think of a growth investor as sort of like buying stuff that's expensive. Because if something's growing like really fast, they're already growing a lot. For example, Apple's share price is like 300 or something, right? Google's like 500, 589 or something. I don't remember. Right? All these like technology companies grow really fast, so they have like a huge like stock price, right? So that means if they have for example, Apple, right, like $350 for a stock, that's pretty expensive, right? Because like you might think, oh, $5, $72, that's not a lot of money. But when people invest in stocks or they invest in real estate, commodities, they buy a lot of it. You know, they buy more than one share. They buy like thousands, millions of shares with a certain amount of money. Let's say they're investing $500,000. That means they're going to buy at least a certain amount of shares, right? So that's a pretty large amount of money. So for growth investor, right, we have a strategy of picking stocks that have growth potential. Now there's a lot of like famous growth investors out there, but it's not like one that would really like catch out you guys. So I'm just like, so for example, right, value and growth are two disciplines, right? Just think of it as like two famous like philosophers, right? And they represent personality. So value, think of cheap, buying something that's less than their value, right? Why would it be less than their value? Because the economy is doing bad, right? A lot of, let's say McDonald's, right? Well, actually, McDonald's is a really great company, but if we pick like a normal like retail company, sells clothes, JCPenney, JCPenney, Macy's, Prada, or whatever. These companies are going to do bad when the economy is bad, so you can buy for a cheaper price, right? And growth investor. The thing behind growth investor is, why are you going to buy something that's expensive? Does anybody know? Why would you buy something that's expensive? I mean, if you're buying,
because I think that its value is going to keep. Its value is never going to go down because it's like a brand, right? Like a brand, like you know the brand so well.
Right.
It's never going to devalue. Just going to grow.
That's a very similar concept, but it's a little bit different from like when we buy like clothes. Like we buy clothes because it's a good brand and it'll last 10 years, right? If I buy like cheap clothes, people will like laugh at me or something. Just joking, but so for example, so the reason why a growth investor invests in expensive things is because that can gain even more value. So even though it's expensive, it can gain more value. So this might not be necessarily true, but here's a way to think about it, right? Think of a Rolex watch, right? Rolex is really like popular, and also like I think it's a really great example because it always like gains value. A lot of watches, you buy them when they're really expensive. If they come out with like a brand new edition, right? It loses its value. You can't like sell it. It's really hard to get rid of sometimes. But a Rolex is something that just keeps gaining value. Just think of it like that. Like all these might not necessarily be true, but I'm trying to like help you guys like remember things. That's how I remember it. So you buy expensive stocks. Let's say I buy an apartment in Manhattan, right? Why the hell would I do that? It's like $1 million for a one bedroom or something. It's really expensive, actually. But the thing is that, let's say they decide to build like a park, a really famous park or a stadium nearby, right? My apartment's going to gain a lot of value. It's going to go up to like $90 million. Let's just pretend, right? So the reason you buy an expensive apartment is because you can make a lot of money from it, right? But that's taking a risk because, let's just think about it this way, right? If you buy a $1 million apartment, right, and it gains value, let's say it goes up to $2 million. It's really great, right? You think you made $1 million and you're so happy, right? But then the thinking of a value investor, right, is that if I buy an apartment for, let's say this value investor buys an apartment in Queens or something, pretty nice apartment. Let's say they paid $300,000 for it, right? So they buy this apartment for $300,000, which is not $1 million. Buy a really nice apartment, but because it's in Queens, right? Let's say they built like a huge mall or something around it, right? It's going to gain a lot of value. Let's say this thing goes up to like $2 million or something, right? That means that the value investor made more than the growth investor, right? Because if you buy something, usually when you buy something cheap, it has the ability to gain much more value. So if you buy Coke at $5 when the company first started, and the company goes to $70, right? That means that you made a lot of money. But if you buy an expensive company like Apple, right? And you buy them at, let's say, $350, and they go up to $400, you think $400 is a lot, but that's not a big change. Does that make sense? So usually, like something that's cheaper will gain more value, right? So like, let's say I buy this pen for $1, and let's say in 20 years it goes up to $3, right? That's a 200% change. But if I buy something really expensive, right, for like, let's say $100, and it only goes up to $101, I don't make that much money. So the main thing is that the cheaper something is, the more money you can make. And that's why there's so value investors and growth investors like to fight with each other sometimes. So these are two different personalities, right? What's up?
I have a question.
Sure.
So you were talking about
Because these are ways to make money in your portfolio. So those companies are great, but sometimes you can't make a lot of money from them. So just like Laura mentioned in her class, she mentioned that. She also mentioned value and growth. So the reason why people buy smaller stocks that don't have a big name is because they can grow more. They can make money from it. So for example, let's say in your portfolio, right, you have McDonald's, Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, whatever, and they all give you like 3% return, right? Just 3%. But then if you invest in a cheap value stock and you give it maybe like a year or 2 years to grow, and let's say your decision was right, you might be able to make 20% plus or 50% on this portfolio, right? So you have 3% gains here, but you have one stock that gives you 20 to 50% gains. So my philosophy of just like investing is that you need to make your money somewhere. Because I used to have, when I was playing that stock game when I was younger, I did the same thing. I just bought a lot of famous names, like Walmart and stuff, and I just let them like sit, and I made money. Like I made like 4,000 at the end or something. It was like a 4% return. But in order to really make money, a lot of investors look for value or growth. So they buy, let's say they buy this small name technology company, right? Nobody knows about it. But that company grows a lot because it's small. They make their money. So that's an example of a growth investor because they're buying stocks that are expensive but have a high growth potential. So you can make a lot of money there. And then the other thing is the value investor. I know I answered it kind of like long-winded, but it's...
what I think about it. Yeah, actually, I'm an investor.
Right.
Then I know the concept of the growth and
value. Yes.
Yeah, value.
Mm-hmm.
But so who am I? So I'm always aiming the both. So.
Right. Oh, okay. I see. So you have to, So you don't have to actually like follow like one of these. These are just personalities. You can just have value and growth. If you're doing this for yourself, you can do whatever you want. Nobody's gonna stop you, right? You can say, oh, I have some value here, I have some growth here, and I'll just go. But like for me personally, right? There's a good number of people out there that have a certain type of personality. Like I'm a value investor at heart, so I like to buy cheap and let it gain value. Some of my friends are like very like aggressive. You know, they like to buy expensive, and then because they think it's going to be worth more later, right? So there's different types of personalities. You can do whatever you want, but these are just like the two types of personalities. You can mix and match, and you can do random picking. Make sense? And usually, like it's value is more like I think a lot of growth investors are more like aggressive, right? Because you're buying something with more risk. So if you have the ability to be more aggressive, sometimes like that's some growth investment. Does that answer your question? It's like all by personality, and there's no
So
like
that means
real.
he's growth and value investors.
So he has some value and growth investments, but that doesn't mean he's one or the other. It's just like there's a lot of famous investors out there who pride themselves on saying that I'm a very famous value investor. I'm the father of value investing. I buy cheap stock, whatever, and I wait for it to grow. So it depends on personalities, but there's like in finance, there's a lot of people who like to pick one type of personality, right? So and obviously the growth one is more risky because you're buying something expensive, so if it loses value, you're dead. Any more questions? So that makes sense, right? One is cheap, one is expensive. Sure, makes sense. Okay. Okay. So for this class, we're actually going to be using. I'll just post this somewhere. We're going to use this site called Investopedia.com.
I have a quick question. I haven't heard it all the time.
So,
what does it mean, emerging markets again?
So emerging markets means that, think of the word, right? Market is just financial. Emerging means they're coming out. So a lot of emerging markets are like China.